Question? Yes.
How was the sky crane method decided on, and what other possible methods were considered for lowering the vehicle footprint?
You know, I actually don't know the answer to that. You can answer that? Okay. Go.
Well, I can answer it from a very high level, because I was the AA for science when this came into headquarters. We needed to do the sky crane because previously with the balloon landings, where we just bounced our way in, the rovers were very small, and we couldn't use that technique for this larger rover, and we knew we wanted all these instruments. We had to have all these instruments simultaneously in order to be able to nail whether there was life on Mars at some time. So we were desperate to have the heavier rover, and the sky crane was by far the least riskiest out of all of them. But I mean, this is sometimes when you're in science, you actually do the science, and then after a while, you end up going down to Washington D.C. to work with Congress and the White House to try to explain what you're trying to do. So they'll give you funding, which is what I was doing when I was downtown. And the problem with the sky crane was it looked so risky that we knew we were going to have real trouble when it came in. So we started inside the building. You probably haven't heard these stories. At NASA headquarters, we started inside the building. We had a simulation of the 7 minutes of terror. And the first time we aired it was in a meeting where we have all the upper staff at NASA headquarters. We have these internal meetings to decide what we're going to do. And so I decided just to bite the bullet and try it with everybody in the room. So I just sat back and played this thing and watched everybody's face just blanch white. I mean, absolutely white, because nobody wants to be in a situation where they take that much obvious risk with this big an investment. I mean, this is hard to convince Congress it's a good thing to do. It's hard to convince the White House, because nobody wants a failure on their hands. But we didn't have any choice, basically. This was the least riskiest thing we could do to get the data we had to have.
I knew about the fact that it was too heavy to land the airball way, but I didn't this is great, and I didn't also understand if there were other options, because there were riskier options. I mean, but we had to convince everybody. So the big job was, the difference was, we were very lucky at that point in time, because we had Mike Griffin as NASA administrator, and he was an aerospace engineer. I mean, he has a book on aerospace engineering, a textbook. And so we were actually able to brief him and convince him that this was what we needed to do, and it was the least riskiest approach. And technically, we could explain it to him. If we had had a more political administrator at that point in time, they may have decided not to do it. So it was just one of those things that happens. It's serendipity. You just get the right bunch of people together at the right time, which, and you change history. So we were just lucky. Okay? Thank you. This is great.
It's exciting that we're learning from each other as here.
Yeah.
And now Mary will speak on her own behalf.
Oh, yeah, okay. My turn?
And,
Yeah. I'm going to show you a film from my first space flight. But
right on the set!
Thank you. So what happens when you're getting ready for space is it takes a long time. For this particular flight, my first space flight, we had a whole bunch of different payloads we rolled through, and we were assigned as a crew for almost 3 years before we flew. Okay, so we all got to know each other really well, because we had been working in a place the size of a closet before we ever flew in a spaceship. So these guys are like my brothers. We're like a big family. We still keep track of each other, and it's a lot of fun. So this is the crew, and you can start the movie.
You can only show...
Should I take the sound off? Take the sound off, yeah.
And get something new out of it. There's nothing.
Can you take it off? Yeah, great. Okay, so that was Brewster. The commander is talking for this part, but I'll just talk through the whole thing. Here we are getting into the bus. Before you fly, you're in quarantine, mostly so you aren't around kids, because kids make you sick. Okay? They have lots of germs. Sorry, guys. But so you're in quarantine, then you get in the spaceship, and it lights off. These are the main engines that are lighting, and you can feel the spacecraft tip when that happens, and then those big solids light off, and it goes boom, and then you're coming off the pad. And you're sitting on your back with your feet up in the air, and then the shuttle, you're going to watch it as it clears the tower, it's going to turn, and you're going to be heads down, and you're going to fly heads down all the way to space. Okay? So, now I was a flight engineer on my first flight, so I didn't see any of this, because I was so busy working, watching the numbers and stuff, that I was totally oblivious of the whole ride. On my second flight, I deployed Magellan, so I was down in the middeck all by myself. I didn't have anything to do, unless we needed to bail out, which luckily didn't happen. And I got to really enjoy the ride, and it's a great ride. Okay? So it all depends on what your job is. You may notice what you're doing, what's going on around you, or you may be so focused you're not noticing a thing. But it only takes 8.5 minutes. That's it. Well, 8 minutes and 10 seconds before the main engine's cut off. So I basically had trained as a flight engineer for Ascent for 3 years, and it was over in 8 minutes and 10 seconds. You know, but all your training is to handle stuff if anything goes wrong. And basically, nothing went wrong. So when nothing goes wrong, the computers just do it, okay? And you don't have to do anything at all except make sure the computers and everything are working right. So it was a great ride. There's the big solids coming off. This was at night. Our first launch was at night. And when the solids separate from the shuttle, they separate with rockets, so you just fly through a big flame. And then you get up on orbit, the main engine shut off, and you look down at the Earth, and that's what it looks like. It's a fast ride.
Is it all quiet up there?
Yeah, there's no air outside the spaceship, so there's no sound. Okay. Now you do get sound in the spaceship, particularly when the big, when you're moving the spacecraft, those big burn your engines fire and stuff, because they work on hydrazine, and you get a boom, big booms. But here we are setting up the spacecraft. First you got a rocket, you're going to orbit. Then you get up on orbit, and you got your checklist, and you got to make the spaceship into an on-orbit orbiting laboratory. So you have 1,442 switches that you got to reconfigure, and you just follow your books. Here, this is what it's like to go downstairs. There's just a hole in the floor, and you just float down. Okay? So it's great because you can just sort of move around. Now you got to be careful that you don't stall out. You got to learn how to move around if there's no gravity, because if you're stuck in the middle of the room here, if you didn't push off from the walls or the ceiling or the floor enough that you stalled out, you'd have to call one of your friends to come get you. Very embarrassing. You don't want to do that. Okay? So you have to learn to push off. So it's sort of like swimming, but there isn't any water, so you can't push, right? So on my first flight, we had 3 spacecrafts that we were deploying. These were commercial spacecraft. This was before the Challenger accident, so we were launching commercial spacecraft, and they're spin stabilized, and then you just release them off a big spring and they pop out. You hang around till the solar arrays deploy, and then you pull away. So when that big rocket fires to take the spacecraft, the satellite, up to orbit, if it blows up, you aren't close enough that you're in trouble. So the spinning top part, see the big round ball on the bottom with a nozzle? That's the rocket that's going to take it to the right place from where you let go of it. So we're monitoring the spacecraft, making sure that it's in good shape. This was an RCA spacecraft, this particular one. And you just drop them off where they need to go to get to the right orbit for what it needs to be. When you're up on orbit, flying in a spacecraft, things are a little different because it's orbital mechanics now. It's not like it is down there. So if you want to go faster, you have to hit the brakes, because if you hit the brakes, you go into a lower orbit, which speeds you up. So the whole thing about orbital mechanics is very counterintuitive when you're up there. Okay? So Woody and Jerry, we had 5 guys in the crew, Woody and Jerry, and 2 payload specialists. Charlie Walker was working this big experiment. He was developing a drug called erythropoietin, which we couldn't get pure enough here on the planet, so we took it up to space, because without gravity you don't have convective mixing, so you can get things that are really pure. Okay, so that's what he was working on the whole time, and here he is working on this experiment, and he just worked away down the middeck on the experiment for all 7 days. Then we had Rodolfo Neri-Vela, and he was from University of Mexico, and he was doing all sorts of experiments on behalf of Mexican scientists and engineers, and he was an electrical engineer just like you, Florence. So he flew in space with a spaceship. So And he was working really hard, and his experiments were just all over the place. He had stuff to do for everybody. So he was doing biology, chemistry, physics. I mean, he was running the gamut. Here the guy's getting ready for yeah. There's Rodolfo. He's getting ready to section a plant. Here he's an electrical engineer, but now he's a biologist. So sectioning his plant. And Woody and Jerry had 2 spacewalks that they were going to do. We were doing experiments to see the best way to build space stations. This was back in 1985, so we were trying to decide the best way to build space station. And we worked with various engineers around. There I am looking out the window. I was an environmental engineer. I was absolutely amazed at how fragile a planet looked. What really bothered me in between my 2 space flights, which was 1985 to 1989, when I looked out the window, it looked like things were getting worse. We are really doing major changes to the surface of the planet in a very short period of time. It really concerned me since I'm an environmental engineer, so that's why I moved back up to Goddard and started working on environmental spacecraft again. So things can happen to you in your career where you're going to go make major changes in what you do just based on what happens because of your jobs. But here's Woody and Jerry. Oh, here's everybody. We had Thanksgiving dinner up on orbit. We were up for Thanksgiving. So it was really fun. You can hardly see Jerry, but he's sitting on the roof. Jerry Ross was absolutely adamant that this was going to be his only chance to sit on the roof for Thanksgiving dinner. So he did. He sat up on the ceiling the whole time. But you don't go to space for the food. It's just, you know, all dehydrated camping food, rehydrated. You have your choice between hot water or cold water, which is disinfected with iodine, so it doesn't taste great. So, but we did have, you know, ocean spray cranberry sauce, just like, you know, I do at home, so that was okay. And we found that tortillas, because we had Rodolfo on board, we flew tortillas instead of bread, and we found out that tortillas are actually much better to make sandwiches in space because you can roll them all 4 sides up, and so you know, the guts of the sandwich doesn't go flying out. So that was our impromptu experiment. Here's Woody and Jerry getting ready to do their spacewalks, the 2 of them to do the space station experiments. And we had one from MIT. Zakiya went to MIT, so she's probably not going to like what I have to say about the MIT experiment because it didn't work that well. We had another one from Langley, and that worked a little better. But I mean, the one that didn't work from MIT, it wasn't supposed to work great because it was a time motion study. So it's actually, they had to make it so parts of it worked really well, and they had to run it all the way up to the part where it didn't work so well in order to get the data that they needed to fill in their numbers. So I was just teasing. This is looking out of the back of the spaceship with the guys out on the payload bay. My job during this part of the flight was to operate the robotic arm, the big arm on the shuttle. And here they are building a truss. If you look at this truss, this is a truss from Langley. It actually looks like the trusses in the space station that we have right now because this experiment worked really well. It was called Access, and we were able to hit the timeline, in fact, even do better than expected. Brewster, the commander, was working the cameras, and I was operating the arm. And I had Woody and Jerry on the end of the arm using it like a cherry picker. And because the arm has only 6 degrees of freedom in it, it will come to mathematical solutions where you don't know where it's going to go. So if you're an operator of the arm and you have guys on the end of it, you have to be real careful it doesn't take off in an unexpected way and squash them. So Woody and Jerry were being very nice to me throughout the entire training. You know. And I was, of course, very gracious back saying, yeah, you guys, I'm a woman driver, watch out. So there's Jerry on the end of the arm. He got up on the end of the arm and he wanted me to twist him around so he couldn't see the spacecraft and see what it was like to be all alone in space. So he got up there, and the first thing he did was he shot his arm straight out and started humming the Superman theme. So we had to work through day and night because you're going around the Earth every hour and a half. So you have a sunrise, sunset every 45 minutes. Really? Pretty neat, but you have to manage your sun and dark cycles when you're working outside. Here's Woody on the end of the arm routing a little cord around the top to sort of see what it would be like to route electrical wire through these trusses and stuff. So we had all sorts of little side experiments we were doing once we got the truss set up, and there I am operating the arm. The arm is really fun to fly. It has 6 degrees of freedom. So in your right hand, you got roll, pitch, and yaw, and then your left hand's forward, back, up, down, left, right. Okay, so you put those two together, and you can really, maneuver it around incredibly well once you get used to flying it that way. And we were picking up the trusses and moving them around. There was about 400 pounds, and the guys were just moving them without any problem. You don't want to get too much momentum up. We had trained in case they got too much momentum up to pull the spacecraft away, and then we'd figure out what we were going to do if we had a bad day, but it worked out really well. So here's the MIT experiment called EASE, and we found out that EASE wasn't so easy, but then it wasn't supposed to be. And it was done by a professor that was at MIT, but now he's at University of Maryland, and he's the same professor that has a big water tank that does the research for how you operate in space. Because a lot of times we'll work underwater trying to get ready, because that's the closest, neutral buoyancy is the closest to 0G that we have for trying to train. So if you see Woody and Jerry working on this, during this experiment, their hands got really tired because you got a pressure suit on. It has 4.2 pounds per square inch of pressure, and you're working your hands against a pressure suit, so your hands get really tired. And you can see there's Jerry up on the top. The way you tell your friends apart when they're working out in a spacesuit, one guy always has red stripes on his legs, and the other guy doesn't. And so that's how you know which one's Jerry and which one's Woody, okay, just by the red stripes. So that's why if you see a spacesuit, sometimes they got red stripes, sometimes they don't, and it's just our way to be able to differentiate so you know who you're dealing with. And that's been a tradition for human spaceflight for a very long time. So even if you look at the Apollo pictures, they have that same mechanism for telling each other apart. So if you watch Jerry, who's up on the top, it's sort of hard to see, but if you look at the left-hand portion of the screen, Jerry's going to come around, and you're going to see, and I want you to watch his feet, if you can sort of barely see him. And you're going to watch him see his feet. Watch his feet. He's putting the thing together. Now watch his feet. See what he's doing? You see him kick his feet?
Yeah.
Now, would that do him any good in space? No. There's nothing up there to kick against. But we train in a pool. So the whole time he was up there, if he was having trouble getting stabilized, he used to cheat in the swimming pool by kicking his feet, and he was kicking up there, but it wasn't helping him out. So here's Woody again, and now he's turning EASE around, and this one was a little more difficult to manipulate because it had sort of a difficult center of gravity to manage, but it still was not hard for him to manipulate, and that was part of the experiment. And the only real problem we had through the entire flight was right here where we brought EASE back down, and there was a pin you had to put through it to reattach it to the spacecraft, and the pin wouldn't go through very easily. But luckily Jerry was down at the bottom. Jerry grew up in a farm in the Midwest, and he's a strong guy. So he just finally brute forced the pin through, and it worked. So otherwise we were trying to figure out how to dispose of it. We had an experiment looking at thunderstorms from space. And if you look at the excitations you're going to see from lightning up there, well, you can barely see it, but we could see colors from the top of the thunderstorms, reds and blues. So we were recording that so that there would be some documentation, because you can't see those colors when you see them from underneath, but you can if you're all the way over them looking down. So we were able to see that from the spacecraft. Reds and blues, it's amazing. This is what it's like looking at the Earth. You're going across the Sinai Peninsula. We were just holding cameras up in the windows. Film cameras, we flew these great big canisters of film. We just have a little thumbnail drive now. So. Yeah. But again, this is just what it's like if you were just looking out of the spacecraft, looking down at the Earth. This is coming across the Atlantic Ocean. You're going towards the east, okay? Because we go easterly. We want to have a cape to the east, so we're over the ocean in case we blow up. We rain down on the ocean instead of on people. So, and here we are getting ready to come back home. This is
Charlie and Rodolfo down on the middeck. There's a physicist here. Yes, this is plasma. So when you're in physics class, you're going to learn about this theoretical thing that physicists talk about called plasma. But if you're in a spacecraft, it's a really real thing because you're seeing it out your windows when you come back in through the upper atmosphere. And you're totally enveloped in this plasma, so that's what it looks like with the plasma coming over the upper window of the spacecraft. And you can see a little plasma right on the bottom of this. And when you're coming back in for re-entry, you turn the spacecraft in big S turns, so no one part of the bottom of the spacecraft gets too hot. You know, we don't burn off the coating. We have these really tiles that with liners in between. So you're just roll a spacecraft like this, so you keep the heating even. But first, it's over the east coast of China. You flip the spacecraft around, you burn to slow down, then you flip the nose, then you just glide all the way across the Pacific Ocean. We landed in Edwards Air Force Base, and this is what it's like looking out the window, side window, when you're coming over the coast of California. And what you can see were clouds, and that sort of, it was cloudy. When we burned, it wasn't cloudy. We weren't supposed to land through clouds, but sometimes well, there's Oxnard, that looks pretty good, but sometimes the weather doesn't always cooperate because it takes you a while to get back in. So we actually came through a cloud, but here we are in final. Came through the cloud and we were right where we were supposed to be, which was really good because you don't have any engines, so you're just gliding. But you take a big turn when you're coming in, and that way you can make a smaller circle if you're too low, or a larger circle if you're too high. So that's why we do a great big, it's called going around the hack. You do a great big circle coming in, and then you just straighten out. And you don't drop the landing gear until right before you're going to land because you don't want that much drag. Okay? And we've been up for 7 days. Brewster, who is the commander, is landing the spacecraft. What amazed me was, here we are dropping the gear. I dropped the gear, and I expected that we would, really touch down hard, because you're in this flying brick. Well, Brewster, I could hear the wheels going on the runway out at Eddy before I could feel any pressure in the seat. And I sit in a commercial airliner and sometimes feel like my teeth are going to get knocked out of my head. And I go, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? I've been flying with guys that can make a flying brick into an absolutely soft landing. And so what's wrong with these guys? But anyway, so. Looking out the side window of the spaceship when we're coming into Edwards, that's what it looks like. So you can see how fast we're going as we get. Now that was derotation. Now the nose is down, so you can see the speed will pick up. So that's just looking out the side window and how fast everything's going by. To give you an idea, as compared to when you're in a regular airplane, you're going a little bit faster, and it takes you a little bit longer to slow down because of that. So during this period, we were always landing out at Edwards because we needed the extra runway space in case we had anything we didn't expect. So they started landing in Florida after that. So here we are, getting ready to get out. Now you have your 1,442 switches you have to reconfigure before you can get out. So that's why they sit there for so long. You're in there, and here we are walking out. And we've been up for 7 days. We felt really good. But at that point in time, you haven't had a shower for 7 days. So the first thing you want to do is hit the shower when you get back to the crew quarters. And that shower feels really good. That's it.
I have just a couple of curiosity questions for you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of younger kids in here that might have some of the same questions. Like when you go up, you said that you're going up, you're facing downward.
You're
Sitting in a chair, but you're upside down.
You're upside down, yeah, because the spacecraft comes off of the launch pad, and then you roll to go east. So you roll, and you're sitting upside down.
Okay, so my question is, when you're coming back,
Yeah.
are you still downward?
No, we're upside. We're right. Yeah, no, you burn upside down, and then you flip the nose of the shuttle over, and this is going on over the coast of China. You flip the nose down, and then you come in like that. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah. So you burn like this, flip the nose down, and then you fly in like that.
Okay,
All right.
okay.
Hold that up again.
Hold that up again. Hold that up again for a minute.
Thank you.
All right.
Then I have a second question.
Yeah.
Being, I mean, because you've went out twice, what kind of preparation do you have to do with your body to get your body ready to be in a no gravity?
Well,
I feel like your muscles. I mean, you're talking about this guy, the one guy, was lucky that he was a farmer and he used brute strength. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's different up there than it is
Down here, and there is no, well, when you get in, you have to be in shape.
Yeah. Well,
Okay, because they run you on a treadmill. When you go down for your interviews and stuff, they run you on a treadmill until you can't, until you go anaerobic. And then they keep you going for a little bit. I mean, one of the things that was really lucky about me, I was living up in Utah, and I was running up a mile above sea level. So when I got down to Houston for my interview, and I got on the treadmill, I smoked it because, I had all this oxygen in my system. So, but once you get down there, and they invest in you for the year of training, then they don't want to, do anything that's going to have you hurt yourself.
Yeah.
So when I was assigned to a crew, no skiing. Before I moved to Houston, they said, sell your motorcycle, because they don't want you to hurt yourself. So you do stuff like play racquetball and that kind of stuff, but mostly you just run, and they're very careful about what you do because they don't want you to get hurt.
Yeah, because I see it, after you landed, you guys were coming off, and you're just like walking off like it was like you just stepped off of an airplane. But
you didn't see us before we got off.
Yeah.
First of all, we're all test pilots, right? So so what is that? What's the motto of a test pilot? I'd rather die than look bad. Okay. So
muscles don't turn to jello.
When we were on re-entry on my first flight, that one, and I was a flight engineer, and about a quarter of a G, we're pulling 1/4 of a G, and I went to pick up my arm to write something on my knee board, and I felt like it weighed 2 tons. It was sort of like, and I thought to myself, oh, this is going to be really fun, But when you get down, you have to get out of your chair really slowly. You also have to remember that you're not on orbit anymore, so you can't nosedive down to the middle. We had one guy really hurt himself. All right. So but you gotta be very slow. So you're taking it slow in that spaceship as you're reconfiguring the 1,442. And some crews come out faster than others. We've had people, in particular passengers on board the shuttle, that have had some real problems. So there's differences there.
There's a lot of adjustments that you have to make physically and mechanically, and
yeah,
you guys made it look so great.
Thanks. We had a good time. That was really a fun crew. Yes.
After the unfortunate Challenger accident, were there any major overhauls to your protocol once you were in space?
Yeah. After the Challenger, the first accident, yeah, and yes, and I was part of the test team for the new escape gear because I was the smallest guy in the office. Well, Marsh and I were about the same size,
Okay.
but we so I had the big guys working it and the small guys working it, but we never wore pressure suits. If you saw us going out to the spacecraft, we had cotton flight, just bags, like you're flying a regular airplane. No pressure suits, no G suit, no nothing, okay? And so, because we train in T-38s, this is part of the training, we train in T-38s where we can pull up to 6 Gs, and we always fly without G suits. So we didn't need suits in the spacecraft because we could only pull 3 Gs. So you're going to bend the shuttle if you pull more than 3 Gs. So 6 Gs gives you, twice as much margin. You don't need a G suit. So we had those orange, after the accident, we had the orange pressure suits. On my second flight, I was down on the middeck all by myself. The only thing I had to do was I had an altimeter, and my job was if we had to bail out, which we couldn't do on the first flight. Okay, the first shuttle flights, first 4, they had ejection seats, but after that, they took the ejection seats out, and we didn't have anything, no escape gear.
Well, then they gave us this pole so we could theoretically bail out of the shuttle if you were going to get it to glide straight and level over the Atlantic Ocean. So my job was to get the pole out, blow the hatch at a certain altimeter reading, you know, on the commander's command after a certain command. I wasn't allowed to do it without his blow the hatch. At the right altitude, blow the hatch off, deploy the big sort of bar that, you know, theoretically would take you past the leading edge of the wing, and then get everybody to bail out. Okay, and we had parachutes. So that was the major change. Okay, and it was really my first flight. You know, well, sometimes you're in the shuttle for a long time because you get holds and all that kind of stuff. And we had we could unzip. We're sitting on the back of the chairs because the chairs are up like that, so you're sitting on the back of the chairs. We're cracking jokes. We're having a good time. Second flight, we're in these really uncomfortable pressure suits. They're hot. You know, you have air flowing through a tube coming out of the neck dam, and it's blowing all your stinky air in the suit, you know, because you're sweating because it's hot. And then it's just, it was different. It was different, yeah.
When you're trying to, like, when you're upside down, don't you feel sick?
When you're upside down, don't you feel sick? No. If you're the kind of person that feels sick when you're upside down, you should probably work in mission control, not in the spaceship. Okay? But, you know, and you'll know if you get motion sick because you won't be happy flying in airplanes either. Okay? But that's okay, because guys in mission control have just as much fun, almost, I think. Like what Florence was talking about. I mean, I worked as a Capcom too. Now, that's a cultural difference that I learned today between unmanned spacecraft ops and human spacecraft ops, because we don't have three-letter words. We had little titles, like the flight director is flight, and I was talking to the guys in the spacecraft, so that was called a Capcom, or capsule communicator.
We have Capcoms.
You have Capcoms, and they talk to the spaceship.
No. They beam commands up.
They beam commands up.
Yeah, that's all there is.
Oh, I thought maybe there was voice command. I thought we were getting really fancy. Turn left now.
That was kind of stupid.
We have a little one of yours.
Oh, yes.
How come that you launch in like a big one and then when you come down, it's like a little bit of it?
Can you say that again? I couldn't hear you.
How come that when you launch, there's like this big tall one, and then when you land, there's like a little bit of the top?
Yeah, just a little. Yeah, you're very observant. You get smaller. When you launch, you have two great big solid rocket motors, one great big fuel tank, and you just blow all those off on the way up to orbit. So it's much, much bigger when you go up than when you come down. Did that answer your question? Okay, good.
How do you determine which astronauts go into space and which don't?
How do you determine which astronauts go into space and which don't? That's what the bosses of flight crew operations decide that. And I think they put the crews together after watching. You all work together real carefully and a lot, and you fly together, and they watch how everybody works together, and they decide who's going to fly together. And I always thought the commander was part of choosing the crew, which sometimes they are in the old days, the old Apollo guys and stuff. But during the shuttle, when I flew during the shuttle program, my first flight, Brewster, my commander, I was so excited when I got to see the crew I was going to be flying with, and I was so happy I was going to be working for Brewster because I thought he was such a great guy, and he's really smart, he's a really good pilot. And so we were on the elevator coming down out of George Abbey's office after they announced the crew, and I said, Brewster, thank you so much, because I figured he had to pick me, and Brewster goes, I just met the crew too. So it's a sort of a mystery. Okay? Yes?
What do you need to do to get ready to go fly into space?
What do you need to do to get ready to go?
What kind of, do you need to like prepare to?
Yeah, what you need to do when you get assigned to a crew, and usually it's a minimum, it's a year before your flight. When you get assigned as a crew, you get assigned your role as a crew member, and what you train doing depends on what you have to do on orbit. So when I was a flight engineer on this flight, I was flying in airplanes a lot.
training on approach and landings for the shuttle, and I was flying the arm, so I was flying a simulator a lot. We have digital simulators. It's like the Mars approach. A lot of what we do in orbit you can't test on the ground. So in flying the arm, we have two kinds of ways you can practice to get ready. There's digital simulations, and then there are mechanical simulations. One's hydraulic. That one doesn't work real well. And then there's one hydraulic one that's in the pool that works a little better. So, but the hydraulic one in the pool is an engineering model, so it works the opposite way of a shuttle arm because it wasn't set up to train people. So it's not that straightforward. Okay.
You gotta figure it out.
Yeah, you got to figure it out. That's right. How old do you have to be to start training as an astronaut? Well, actually, you guys are in training right now. you start in elementary school, and then you learn. When you working on a spaceship, and in fact, at any job, you use every single thing you learn from the day you go to school, right? So you're actually in training right now to do whatever job you're going to end up doing. But when it comes to training, you know, to be an astronaut, get hired in, it depends on whether you're a pilot astronaut or, you know, a mission specialist. If you're a pilot astronaut, most of those guys go to a service academy. The vast majority of them go to Annapolis. So if you want to be a pilot astronaut, you got to study like really hard, get great grades in high school, get a recommendation from Barbara Mikulski so you get into the Naval Academy, and then you're in, and then you have to go through flight. Okay. For the mission specialists, most of them have doctorates in either science and engineering, math, that kind of stuff, STEM. So, you know, that usually takes people a while to do, and by the time you get down to Houston, you're around 30 years old to 40 years old, depending on how long. Okay? Does that answer your question? Yes?
One, you're very awesome. One, I was just wondering, with all the movies and TV shows and things like that where everyone portrays space, but you've actually experienced it, what's like one thing that burns you up the most that they always get wrong? Yeah.
Well, it's usually the interpersonal relationships of the crews. Because they have to make a storyline, which usually involves romance of some kind. And believe me, if you're working with these guys, they're like your brothers. They aren't. So you just don't go there. You know? So that's usually the most irritating part, are all these little cutesy things they're doing. It's just not like that. It's like your brothers go,
Anything like majorly technical that they always seem to get wrong? Like, I mean, I know I didn't think about like how all of a sudden you feel super duper heavy when you get back. I mean, that never comes across in anything.
No. And there's all sorts of little things like that. And it's usually, and a lot of the moving around. When you're first up on orbit, so it's one thing that really bothers you. Because when you first get up on orbit, you are totally biased in a 1G environment. Because you've always been in a 1G environment. So you're used to seeing your pictures like this, right? So you're used to seeing the instrument panels like this, and you're always coming at it from the right angle. But when you're up on orbit, all of a sudden you're coming into these instrument panels, or a monitor or anything, and you can come from the top down, the side in, you know. You very rarely make it from the bottom up like you're used to. And so, you know, you're cranking around like this because you have to get oriented to your 1G bias. And that goes on for about 2, 3, 4 days. Same thing with looking at the planet. North is up. We're trained north is up. So you watch everybody crank around the window. North is up. North is up. And then after 3 or 4 days, you can identify all these, you know, land masses, and you don't have that north is up bias anymore. So you're perfectly fine looking at south is up or east is up, and then and that's what happened if you looked at the movie. South was up. So I watch people in the audience cranking around, trying to, you know, because we're north up 1G biased organisms because we grew up on this planet, and that's probably the biggest thing that bothers you because they're up there acting like they're still in a 1G environment.
Yeah.
And it's not. Yeah.
Skillings, and I'm one of the Dawsons, and I'm just thrilled to meet you. But I want to ask you a question. If you had a second chance to do it, would you be interested in the Mars expedition? Would you love to do that?
Love to go to Mars? Well, actually, when I interviewed for the astronaut corps, they asked me what I wanted to do, and I was coming out of Utah. I was skiing all the time, and I looked right at and John Young, you know, the guy that walked on the moon, you know, was head of the astronaut corps. He asked me, "What do you want to do if we hire you?" And I mean, I'm sitting there, and you ever been in a job interview and said something that you wanted to take back? And it just came right out. And I went, "Sir, I want to go cross-country ski on a Martian ice cap." And, you know, I just went, I thought, oh, what a stupid thing to say. Take it back. Just take it back. But he was very gracious about it. So yes, I have thought about it, but it's an awful long way to be in a closet with a bunch of guys and no shower.
And no shower.
And no shower.
Sorry for taking up anybody else's time, but you mentioned that you can see like some of the environmental damage that has been happening to the planet from space. I just wonder if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, what bothered me, you know, and a lot of these aspects are, you know, there's seasonal variabilities, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, but this is just my reaction from seeing what I with my eyes. My first flight was in November. My second flight was in May, and they were 4 years apart. And I could see deforestation that had happened, particularly in the Amazon, you know, river delta. I could see what I felt was a lot more sediment coming off of river stuff because of erosion, because of the deforestation. I thought the air quality looked worse. Now, some of that was because there had been a volcanic eruption in between, but that's not your, you know, this was not a rational response. This was a gut response. Man, that air looks really dirty. Well, I still do that in an airplane. I look out, you know, and go, ugh, I breathe in that, you know. So, yeah.
In our lifetime, what do you see as a realistic goal for space travel?
What do I see as a realistic goal
in our
for
lifetime,
space?
yeah. We hear a lot of things in the media. We want to go to land on Mars, do all these different things. What, in the next 20 years,
For
what do you
human
see
space flight or
human
for
space flight? I'm sorry.
Okay, for human space
I'm
flight.
sorry.
Because I mean, I think the robotic guys are
Well, yeah.
out, you know, doing incredible things, and they're just going to continue to do incredible things. For human space flight, you know, right now they're trying to decide. Right now they're taking a pause. I'll try to explain it this way. The way the civilian side of government invests in science and technology is we buy down risk, and then after the government buys down the risk, you turn it over to the private sector, it gets turned into jobs. It's an economic pump. You know, it's basically set up during the Eisenhower administration after World War II, and it's worked very well. Okay, so that's what the civilian side does. I mean, they buy down risk on things, and then we bump it out. And so for human spaceflight, we've been buying down the risk. In low Earth orbit for 45 years, they're bumping it out. There's a lot of controversy about that.
Okay.
But 45 years is, believe me, it's a very long time for investment in the civilian side of government. DOD doesn't work this way, but we do. Okay. So it's time. It's time for these private companies to take over, SpaceX and the other ones that are working on it. Okay? So we'll see what happens.
They say that it's $300 million you can buy a seat to the space shuttle. For $300 million, if you happen to have that lying around somewhere.
No.
You can get, no, because the guy that just skydived down, the guy just skydived from up in the, whatever his first sky.
Yeah.
And so that's all a private company or something?
Oh, yeah.
And that they have access to that. They said if they're asking investors to put in $300 million.
Oh, to fly people in space? Mm-hmm. But it's not on a space shuttle. They're not flying a shuttle.
Yeah, it's a shuttle. You have to go take program like you would at NASA. I mean, this was a news
thing. No, but it's
thing.
probably a capsule. Regular rocket launch with a capsule, with a ballistic re-entry. Right?
Yeah, so they launch and they go to the space station.
Yeah,
and they let them go out and, you know, muck around a little bit.
Well, they don't have an agreement with NASA yet.
She's got the inside folks.
That answers my question.
I mean, well, just to finish it, just real fast. For the riskier part of it, which is not the low Earth orbit part of it, which the government's going to continue to do, because it's still risky, they're trying to decide whether they want to go to Mars, back to the moon, or go to an asteroid.
That's what I hear.
And so it's an active discussion right now about what they're going to do. These things are hard to pick.
This is going to be a weird question, but I think it's important. When you're in space, there's like no gravity. How do you guys go to use the facilities?
How do you use the bathroom?
Yeah.
Well, you're talking to the right person because after the first flight in the shuttle, the head didn't work. I'm an environmental engineer. We used to be called sanitary engineers. So John Young asked me to fix the head after the first shuttle flight. This was the same guy that I made the bad comment to about what I felt like the bad answer. So John Young calls me in his office and says, Mary, the head didn't work. Fix it. I said, sir, I'm used to working at the other end of the pipe. Because you're a smart girl, you'll figure this out.
That's funny.
You know, and so I got a team of engineers and we worked on fixing the head because it didn't work. And it was actually a very important job to do because you have that many people in one the size of a closet, and if the facilities don't work, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So it works. It's a wet vac. Basically, it's a wet vac, and it works.
That would make a lot of sense.
Awesome.
Yeah. You have to be very careful about how you use it. You have to take training. Right. So part of your training for space flight is not.
If you try to like
and you have to learn to be lined up right. So there's a camera. We have to follow the camera. And I got in trouble because I put our boss up on the ceiling over the pipe. For a while, I didn't think I was going to get a flight to space. He was okay. He had good sense of humor.
the worst part of the flight.
How does it feel to be in a spacesuit? Well, if you're in a spacesuit to go out on a spacewalk, it's pretty restrictive because it's a pressure suit. So you have to learn to move, and you train in underneath the water in a swimming pool. So you have to.
So does that mean like literally you're feeling?
You have metal joints, and you're pushing against something all the time. Okay.
Also, how low is the gravity?
Pardon?
How low is the gravity?
How low is the gravity? It's microgravity. So it's 0.00042, I think, or 047. I mean, it's microgravity. That's good. You know, it's not pure gravity. It's not pure
So you're floating.
0G. It's microgravity in low Earth orbit. Yeah. Very good.
Those are
Future astronaut right there. Are we done?
Yeah.
Questions about like when you start training and what age and so forth. And we have the youngest member of this wonderful panel from NASA who actually created that model of the shuttle that Mary Cleve, our astronaut, held up, that she made out of Legos. And we're very proud that her mother, Rhonda Tomlinson, is a member of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center Board. And Zakia has become an engineer at NASA. We thought you can see all of you young people, all of these stories are so wonderful, and she can tell you what it's like earlier on in a career getting into this work. Zakia.
Thanks. So not that long ago, about when I was age of some of you guys, I got to go to a really cool program called Space Camp.
Can you talk a little
Why don't
about
you stand up?
Stand
up. Right. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I was 11 years old, about the same age as a lot of you guys, I went to a program called Space Camp in Florida, and it was an amazing week. And at that point, I decided I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. So pretty young on, I knew I loved space and wasn't quite sure what engineering was, but it sounded like it would be a lot of fun. I like to build things like Legos. I like to figure out how things work, and I thought it would be a really fun career. And 15 years later, I've been lucky enough to work on the shuttle and the space station programs, and right now I'm working on Earth observing satellites that they have at Goddard Space Flight Center here in Maryland. One of the things I really love about the space program is that you have people that have so many different interests all working together. I think none of us up here have all had the exact same studies that we've done in school or career path. We have people who like science, math, and all different kinds of engineering and all different fields of science that are all working together on the same project. So everyone can have their own different interest and you still all end up working together. So there's a lot of different opportunities depending on what you like to do. One of the things a lot of people think about engineering or science, math, that you have to be really good at it in school. And you don't have to be a genius to do it. You just need to have a dream and work hard and trying to make sure that that happens. I wasn't very good at math in school, but I got help from tutors and I worked hard at my classes and got through all of them, not without some tears sometimes, but it's just that it was really what I wanted to do for a career, and nobody could change my mind on that. So you just pick what you like to do and go from there. There's a lot of different opportunities that kind of come your way that you might think of whether that's actually what you want to do or whether but that's what you're interested in. I was in high school and my class were all said we're going to enter a robotics competition. I didn't know much of anything about robotics, but so all right, fine, this is an opportunity that was put forth in front of all of us, and that ended up for the next 7 years or so what I did in school and my job. I found out that I really liked programming, I really liked robotics. I got a position while I was an undergrad working at a lab, and then in grad school, and then a job in Houston training people like Mary. I was a robotics instructor for the astronauts and one of the trainers for one of the last shuttle missions that was going to the space station, which I probably never would have dreamed that that was a job that you could actually do. But there's a lot of different opportunities that kind of come along, and just see if you find something new that you like. You never know. And now the job that I have right now is probably something I never thought I would be doing, but it's fun and it's something new and you learn something all the time. So I think curiosity, like the rover, is one of the things that you definitely need to have is going through engineering and science as a career. And a lot of doors will open up for you from that. So I don't want to take too much of you guys' time because I know we've already run over on for the day.
Up here. Oh, it's the first.
So I'm hoping that we'll see some of you guys at Goddard in the near future if you get a job in science and engineering.
Thank you, Zakia. We want to thank the whole panel. We still have a couple of things for you before you leave. We want to thank you for coming to the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. We thank Free Fall Baltimore for helping us be able to have this program. And we need to make sure that you fill out your evaluation forms and write wonderful things if you feel them, so that we can hopefully continue to have programs here on various topics. I would like to introduce two people who are here, although no, I won't this moment. But it was mentioned that the series of 6 posters that were developed with a partnership with the Women of Goddard and the Maryland Women's Heritage Center will be gifted to you for being here today as part of this program from the Women of Goddard. And Claire has brought a smaller size of the set of the posters and a copy of the book with all the women who were in the posters. And 3 of these women...
The book has 103 different women and 1 page for each, so it gives you lots of choices for careers, exciting careers that you can look forward to having if you'd like. And Florence, who's moving her car right now to avoid getting a ticket, she's left magnets from the SAM.
From SAM, okay.
So,
well, and thank you so much, and I assume some of you may want to have your books autographed, and if people want to have a picture taken with any of the people from NASA. I know most of the questions were for the astronaut, but the exciting work done by everybody else is what makes all of this work possible. And the Mars work, it's so interesting because, you know, the robot is called, the Mars rover is called Curiosity. And look at what our corner is called over there, where we have special programs for children. It's the Curiosity Corner. So we were laughing from the back saying this is so connected to the mission of the Maryland Women's Heritage Center. in terms of stimulating for all of you options and careers for both girls and boys in science, technology, engineering, and math this year, and next year we'll be focusing on the arts. So we have lots of options. Bring your groups back. We can conduct special programs for you. And I have a question from Monica.
Hi everyone, I'm so glad to see y'all here today. My name is Monica and I'm a college dozer today. I'd like to know if I gave everyone a evaluation sheet. If you do not have one, I'd be happy to give you one. And once you fill it out on your way out, please make sure you give it to me. I'll be at the door. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. I'll give you one.
Okay. Wait a second, we have a question over here.
When I was a Girl Scout in juniors, we went on a trip to a NASA center. I want to say it was a Goddard center. I was wondering if they still have that program available.
There are lots of.
It was like a visitor's place, but the girls actually got to go in and like look at the machines, and like they taught us like little things, not anything that would affect anybody else's work, but like taught us like what buttons do what, and if we could talk to people like through the machines and stuff like that. Like it was really cool.
Yeah, there are lots of programs at Goddard. The visitor center is still there. In fact, just being refurbished, so new exhibits there. And yes, there are quite a few programs.
And there's a sister program that 7th and 8th grade girls can apply to at Goddard. You go to the website and you look for the education office. And if you're a student or you're a teacher or a parent, you can follow the links to apply. And these are for 7th and 8th graders, girls.
Okay, thank you.